All right, hi everyone. This video is going to go over your final paper assignment and kind of talk through the details of it, what you need to make sure you remember and that you include, and we'll just kind of talk about this process. So let me go ahead and pull up this page that this video is actually going to be appearing on, and we'll kind of talk through all of the components of the assignment and make sure everyone's in the right place. So right at the top here, you can see it includes all of the sections or all of the components that you need to make sure you include on your final paper. So that includes the title page, abstract page, we'll come back and talk about that in a second, revised introduction, method, results, discussion, references page. This should be now including all of your references from the different sections. Make sure that those are in alphabetical order. We'll talk more about that as well. And then a revised figures page, which is where all of your graphs, tables, things like that, they should all go in the figures page at the end of your paper. And if you'd like, you can include an optional appendix. If you have things that you want to include, like your survey, you don't have to do this. Most people don't do this, but if you wanted to do that, you certainly could. But the rest are required and will be assessed in part of this final paper grade. So let me just kind of go through and talk about a couple formatting tips and then just some general tips on each of the sections and how to kind of revise them in a good way. So formatting tips, again, make sure that you are paying attention to APA formatting. That's going to be a big one on this final paper. Oftentimes I kind of treat the final paper as, in essence, a formatting assignment where what I'm really looking at is, have you learned how to take all of those individual pieces and put them together into a polished APA final paper? And so I'm definitely going to be focusing a lot on APA formatting. So make sure that you kind of pay attention to that and that your paper is formatted correctly. A great resource for this is the Purdue OWL APA website. That shows great information on how to format everything in APA. One other thing I'll mention too is tracked changes. So if you happen to have gotten feedback or used track changes on your document, make sure that you turn those off, that there are no comments or track changes in the final version of your paper. All right, some general tips just about kind of each of the sections I'll go through. Remember, for your introduction, biggest things, make sure that you are reviewing 3 pieces of literature or 3 past articles. And then also just a quick formatting thing that I think some people mistake or forget. When you put your heading for your introduction, it's not the word introduction. You actually use the title of your paper again. I don't know why, but you just put the title of your paper and then start writing your introduction. So make sure that you remember that. Also, at the end of your introduction should be your hypotheses. Those go at the very end, right before your method section. So for the method section, there's a couple things to think about as well. Here, remember when we first wrote our method section, we didn't have the final values or numbers for things like how many participants we had, what the breakdown of their demographic information was, like their average age, the gender split, or the race and ethnicity kind of distribution. So make sure that you update your method section and that you include all of those components. Also on the method section, when we first wrote this, there was a spot at the bottom that said the analysis section of the method. We also didn't include this because we hadn't done this yet, but this is something you'll need to write and include for your final paper. So what this section details is basically how you went about cleaning and organizing your data. So when you took your actual data, how did you kind of go through that process of cleaning and removing participants? Basically, if you look back at the data analysis video, kind of talk through that process so that you can explain that in the paper and know how you cleaned and organized your data before you actually ran any analyses. That gets into in the results section. So for the results section, again, make sure that you're reporting all of your correlations. You should have 3 correlations to report. Even if they're not significant, make sure that you still report them and that you include those in that section. For the discussion section, again, just make sure that you're covering each of those 7 points. Make sure that you hit all of those 7 points and that you make sure to include outside sources for that one. That's one that sometimes people forget and don't include, but make sure that you're tying things back into the literature to kind of tie that knot and close the loop on what you researched at the beginning, what you did, and then how that feeds back into the knowledge on your topic. And then again, for the references, just make sure that you're including all of your references from each of the sections. So you'll have references from your introduction, from the background literature. You'll have references from your method section, which is the citation from that IPIP website where all of the scales came from. And then also you'll have references from your discussion as well. So make sure that you include those. For that discussion, if you use the same references from your introduction, that's actually okay. You can use different ones or the same ones. It's totally up to you. But if you use the same ones from your introduction, don't cite them again in your reference section. You could just leave it at 1. Also, make sure your references are in alphabetical order according to the first author's last name. And then lastly, you should have a figures page at the very end. This is important to make sure this is the only place you include graphs and tables. Some people are tempted to include them in their results section. They should not go in the results section. That should only be text. Any graphs, tables, things like that should all go at the very end of your paper in a separate section titled figures. So make sure that you include those there as well. All right, so that generally kind of wraps up the final paper. Make sure that when you submit this, you submit it in a format, either a Word document or a PDF format are preferred. So hopefully that helps give you an idea of how to go about completing this assignment. Again, you're really taking the sections that you've already written and putting them together and just cleaning up that formatting, making sure that everything looks good. The only things that you'll need to add that are new components for this final paper submission are, number 1, an abstract. And that is just a single page. It shouldn't be more than a page. It could be half a page that summarizes your entire document. So it has sort of like a mini introduction, mini method, mini results, mini discussion, like 1 or 2 sentences on each of those sections should be sufficient. So you'll need to make sure you write and include an abstract that goes right after your title page and before your introduction. You'll need to make sure that you update your method section with the participants so that those are now accurate, and that you include the analysis section of your method. You'll have to write that as well. Aside from those 3 new additions, everything else is cleaning and organizing and putting everything together. So hopefully this helps. If you have any questions, please reach out. I'm always happy to help or talk, and good luck.